sound. That was a little jingle created for the show by LA based Walter ETC, or as some may formally know as Walter Mitty and his makeshift orchestra. Let's see. Conversation 55. With ambient indie beings Briars of North America. In contrast to their soothing ambient indie sound, current world events have unfortunately dictated the opposite. Thus, keeping with the current dialogue of these times, the duo that make up the Briars, Jeremy Thal and Gideon Crevoshay, and I kick off with an open forum discussion on the ongoing events in Ukraine. Wrapping our global affairs discussion, we get back to the music and chat a bit about their recent album, Supermoon, and a re-release of their Orisis album through their current label, Brassland, plus much more. So please, enjoy this heady conversation. And thank you, Rob Lundberg, artist and photographer. Hey guys.
There we go. Here we are.
Yeah. Oh, welcome to Uncontaminated Sounds, which I entitled just after my photographic series prior to the pandemic. Was documenting a lot of musicians and stage performers backstage and intimate, candid portraits, and trying to just really keep it pure and raw, uncontaminated, and really untouched, and really not super edited or filtered or anything like that. Just really capturing that in moment stuff. And obviously with the pandemic, this gave me more opportunity to dive deeper into, the creator themselves, comparatively to just a still. I've gotten the opportunity and pleasure and just an honor to just talk to so many creative people, not only in music, but fine arts and writing and poetry and educators. I just love having cultural conversations. So yeah, it's like I was telling Gideon, Jeremy, I keep it open forum formats, wherever the conversation sways will go, and of course we'll talk about your new work as well, but I'm always curious about the deeper aspects of the work and how you guys came to be and what made you kind of pursue your creative paths and how you got here to this present day. So I guess.
Thanks so much for having us on.
Yeah, of course. It was a pleasure meeting you both, or digitally meeting you both.
Yes.
I guess I always like to, to start with the beginning, middle, end kind of thing. Like, oh, where do you begin? But I don't know. There's so much you can talk about these days, and so I think so many people need healing, globally, and I'm kind of curious what your reaction has been the last couple of weeks regarding Ukraine and musically, and if you know anybody around that area, and etc. I guess.
Thanks for asking that, because that's been, I think, very much on both Jeremy and my mind, because we have friends in Kiev, we have friends all over Russia as well, and we have friends in the surrounding countries, in Poland and the Republic of Georgia, Armenia. Some of this is through our work with One Beat, and some is from other musical projects, but it's all through music, really.
Yeah.
And we have friends that have fled Russia, and we have friends that have fled Ukraine, and some who are still there. And Jeremy is actually doing a podcast with one of them, who's now based in Lisbon. And I've been it's been impossible for me to just not look at the news constantly. It's been taking over my whole consciousness. It's making it into my dreams. And you might not know this from my last name, but it's a bastardized version of Crevoshay, which is a Ukrainian name. That's where my family's from.
Oh, wow.
I don't have family there presently that I know of, but the story of where I come from is very embedded in the history of Jews in Ukraine, and so it's brought up a lot for me in an unexpected way, actually, like dealing a lot with just what my identity is in relationship to Ukraine, and uh, and the journey of Jews from that part of the world through the diaspora, um, which maybe is a good segue to you, Jeremy, because something that maybe people don't know is that Jeremy and I are also cousins, so we have
Oh,
familial ties as well as musical ties. But my heart really goes out to all of the people in Ukraine and this this huge geopolitical shift that's happening that is tragic, and also to uh, I'm really thinking a lot about people in Russia now too, who are
mm,
totally isolated and afraid of what's happening, and so many people are fleeing the country. It's a very volatile time.
mm, mm.
And Jeremy, I'm curious to hear about your conversations with our friends too.
Yeah, it's been really heavy, and I was actually at a benefit concert last night for Ukraine, and there was a I'm in New Orleans right now,
Mm.
and there was a Ukrainian a band. I think they were Americans, but they were singing Ukrainian music, and playing Ukrainian music. There was a fiddler, drummer, three singers, and it was I was thinking about I thought about you. I thought about Crevoshay, and I thought about my own. My family on both sides is from that part of the world, and my stepmom's family is from Ukraine specifically. Um, and so I definitely feel like connected to this place, even though I've never been. And I had a conversation with one of the fellows that was part of a program that Gideon and I have worked on for many years, which is a kind of a music residency program called One Beat. And Margot is from Kiev, now based in Lisbon, and I had a really emotional conversation with her the other night, and I know that since then, things have really only gotten worse,
Mm.
and I can just tell that she's just devastated. And I caught her in like a kind of reflective moment, and she was talking about her childhood and growing up, and the sort of Kiev that she grew up with. And then just like seeing these images, like I saw some text or some Instagram posts from another of our friends, Roman, who's in a great band from Kiev named like Xmir. I'm gonna say it totally wrong, but it's like they're a great kind of they kind of sound like the national Ukrainian style.
Huh. Hmm.
And and yeah, I mean he's a very understated guy and just like very solid, and kind of I have never really seen him emotional. He's just like so sweet and like kind and present. And he's just been posting things, if this is like this house is 3 blocks from where I grew up, and it's destroyed, and he's relocated to he and the rest of the band have relocated to the west of Ukraine, but his parents are still in Kiev, and
Mm.
Margot's parents are still in Kiev, and I know that they're just like crazy worried about them. They need resources. They have no idea what's going to happen. So I'm in this concert last night. It's like we're in New Orleans. It's fun. Everyone's like dancing around. There's like an Afrobeat band that played after, and we're all like having fun. And I'm like, this is cool, but this is fucked up. It's like, and I just, I think like, what do we do?
Yeah. Well, I found myself to kind of just play off that. I found myself like I don't feel right just being here when I know what's going on over there and the rest of the world as well. It's like I feel like I need to do more. Like the other day I went out to Times Square and documented the protest there and met some amazing people and made some beautiful images. But I envision going deeper too. I met a communications director of this certain nonprofit, and I'm hoping to link up with her tomorrow and dive deeper into, you know, uh, their cause and talk more about the Ukraine crises. And she actually is from Kazakhstan, so she was dealing with the crises over there as well. So it's I envision going deeper myself with at least knowing that here in the States, I have the just freedom for open speech and open forum discussions without any repercussions. What's going over there in Russia, where the media has been cut off and just totalitarian kind of dictatorship, I guess. But so I find that duality too of just like you know are like fundraisers, and jams like that super beneficial, or can we do more? I guess, like, I know you can always raise funds, etc., through benefits and stuff, but I guess what else could you do right now as a U.S. citizen and stateside without actually going over there physically?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the there's there's financial support that makes a lot of difference to people who have fled, which is something that we've experienced hearing about through about our friends in Ukraine. And um, I think as citizens we have I mean, if we're in a circumstance here where we have so much, we have more than we realize we have, and we're watching how those who were in a similar situation, really, in an up and coming democracy,
Mm.
um, all of that being immediately taken away. And I think it brings into focus how much we do have and how much power we do have.
Mm.
And yes, we're little individuals, but um, I think we have to keep having conversations like this, and we have to keep putting pressure on our politicians to bring this war to an end, um, and while we're doing that, support the stories and support financially the people that need it the most. But yeah, it's a question. It's a terrible situation. What do you do when you have an autocratic leader with a nuclear arsenal making thuggish threats
Mm.
and killing innocent people?
Mm. That, yeah.
I don't know if you have a better answer to that, Jeremy.
I mean, no, I definitely don't have any answers. I mean, I think it's so hard because, we see what's happening and like I mean, again, it's like I think I'm more used to situations in which like the United States is directly or indirectly like the problem in some sort of conflict, like the Iraq War, for instance. Um, Afghanistan, like there's lots of situations in the last 200 years that would meet those criteria, and this one is like I know there's a lot of talk on the left where it's like this is like the US's fault because we provoked the bear, like we brought NATO into Ukraine and stuff, and I'm like there's definitely an argument to be made for that, but it's like that's not really what's happening. It's like that there's something that's not necessarily coming from our government and financial system that's like creating this problem. But in essence, there's also kind of, because that's the case, it's like it's not so clear what to be done. I would not actually want to be a politician that had to make a decision. Do you enforce a no-fly zone? Like,
Mm.
is that a declaration of war? Does that start a nuclear war? Like, I don't know. Like, um, but yeah. So I have no like answers to any of those questions. But
Yeah.
I do. What I have noticed is, this incredible kind of like fighting spirit of our Ukrainian friends and their friends, and like these pictures of like one that really struck me was like three or four guys in like military fatigues, and like one was like their text underneath like so and so sound designer, so and so DJ, so and so like label manager, and I'm like, oh, these are like people like me, and they're like putting on, they're in their military gear and guns and stuff, and like Margot talked about her mom like taking sandbags and like sandbagging their street and taking out her glasses that her binoculars that she uses for like the opera or for bird watching or something, and she's like watching for like, Russian, operatives, or, so that's so intense, and it's like this country that like literally my friend David has been living there for a couple of years. He's like, come visit. Roman has been like telling me to visit for 7 years now or something, and I'm just like, yeah, I'll definitely get there. Just another fun place to visit in Eastern Europe. And now it's like, no, it's like the fucking apocalypse. So
Yeah.
the other side of it that I think is worth mentioning is the Russian side. I've talked to a couple of our Russian friends. One who lives in Switzerland, Marina.
Hmm.
She like had said she had like a really hard time, like a breakdown, and thinking that when is she ever going to go back to be able to visit her mom? You
Hmm.
know, when is it ever going to be safe for her to go back to the country? Our buddy Sergey just ran out of the country a few days ago,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and I talked to him on a like a group chat, and he was just like he had to say goodbye to his grandma, who's 98 years old, and is not going to necessarily be able to see her. Who knows? I mean, he's in Armenia now, so I don't know. I mean, there's so much upheaval in the world. I spent the last summer in Lebanon, and like there's so much crazy shit happening there. There's so many
Yeah.
places in the world that we don't necessarily focus on. Um, but this is a big one. I think this is like the vibe shift. Like it's like this is like we're on the world war tip.
Oh
Like
yeah.
this other
Yeah.
stuff is just like, what's going on in Yemen or something is like incredibly tragic. Like millions
Yeah.
of people died, but it's like it's regional conflict. This is all of a sudden like I feel like stuff that we haven't felt since the 40s,
Hmm. Yeah.
or
This
at least
is
the 60s.
yeah. This is Europe hasn't seen war in 70 years. And
Except for the Balkans.
yeah. Yeah. But I mean, like this type of maneuvers, like what if you look at history, that was like you know Germany annexing like not
Oh,
Poland initially. It was
Finland. They took
yeah,
Finland.
Finland. Yeah. You see the moves, and you see what Putin's trying to accomplish, and he's not just going for Ukraine. This is testing the West's power, or he's testing the West right now, and the idea of the UN, and
Mm.
he knew the concept of the UN has been weakening ever since, and he's testing the power now. And what concerns me is kind of partnership with China, and what China would do. I don't think necessarily would get involved with the Ukraine or European conflict, but this would open up the gates for them to take over Taiwan, and which that's they've been trying to do so for decades now too. So it does seem like there's patterns in that and maneuvers. It's a game of chess, right? It's a very dangerous game of chess, but it all looks like, yeah, unfortunately, I just don't see a peaceful ending to Ukraine conflict. I don't see how it ends unless Putin says, "Oh yeah, I'll agree to peace." He's not going to do that. I don't think
Yeah.
so. Um,
It's yeah, we're in unprecedented times, I think, in a way, because all the World War II was massive, but not all the powers were nuclear powers, and now they
that's
all
true.
are.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about like I'm not interested in military history or military capacity, but I've been finding myself reading about both of these things
Yeah.
recently. And last night I was up very late, just kind of scrolling through the insane weapons that the U.S. and Russia and China and many other countries in the world have access to, and the amounts of money that have been spent on these things. And it's astounding how we use our human capacity.
Mm.
For creativity.
Yeah, right. Capacity, creativity to threaten each other.
Mm.
and not be able, and we're talking about global existential crises here, not just nuclear ones, but there's so many that we're facing. COVID was a wake up in that way, and climate change. I mean, there's so many things that are existentially threatening us. And yet, we spend so much, almost all of our money, if you look at the global picture, is spent on subterfuge and military um, development and systems of power and control.
Mm,
And I just
When
think
it
about
could be spent on independent rock and roll.
yeah, like what's
that is true.
what? Just imagine the capacity we have to do other things with our creative energy, and I think that's what just to yeah to like kind of go back to music. I think
Yeah.
that's I've been thinking about that in relationship to how Jeremy and I know all these people, which um, I mean, it's an oversimplification to say this, but I will say that when you have connections globally that are forged through creative realms and through storytelling and through truth telling and through connections of the heart, you do not start war,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you have immense empathy, and um, it's it seems like oversimplified, and it is in a way, but it is such a truth, and we've experienced that over and over again. And artists are often the ones that kind of have to tell this story
Mm,
that it's like peace and love, man.
yeah.
But it's so true. It's like if you and it's cliche to talk about love. I've been reading Bell Hooks's uh, beautiful book about love, and she talks about even as an academic, a feminist academic, for years she was sort of shunned for talking about love in an
Mm,
intellectual way, and people are afraid of love. People are afraid to talk about the power that it can hold, and there's many reasons for that. It's been so twisted through religion, through different power structures. But God, if we could just relate through that medium, what
yeah.
would we be able to do?
I think there's, yeah, something that, Gideon and I were in Russia in, what year was that? 2017? Um, for a few weeks for a program there, and there was a moment where I had this moment where I was like, I think I understand why my family left this country. And we were like at a bar. It was one of those nights that we went to this bar. Oh my God, I went to this like kind of dodgy bar in the outskirts of this little town in Russia. And one night, like Gideon saw this dude like slip like a powder into his like date's drink.
Oh, wow.
And then like the next night, and we told the bartender, it was like we were like super freaked out. And then that story merits a follow-up story, which is we're leaving the bar. It was like it was like a joke. It was like a black guy, a Jewish guy, and a Latino guy, two Jewish guys like walk into a Russian bar, and we were like leaving. And we were walking away, and this Russian guy starts running after us, and we're like, "Oh no!" And Akil, like turns around, one of our friends, like ready to fight him, and he's like, "Hello, are you Americans? I want to practice my English." And his friend, he's like, "I'm so sorry, my friend's very drunk. Have a nice night." He's
Yeah.
like, "Welcome." He's like super nice and funny. But the next night we went there, like a bunch of dudes with like neo-Nazi tattoos showed up, and there was this like really brutal fight like right next to the bar. And I
Mm,
started to realize that like Russia is a country like the United States that has been pulverized. Like our countries are pretty similar actually. Like being a superpower, like I think pulverizes culture and humanity, and like all the deep and rich, beautiful Russian culture. That's it's always been like a lot of my favorite music and literature and stuff. I think was just like has been ground down, and I think that provides like a fertile ground for this kind of totalitarian uh taking totalitarian mindset taking root. And because when I talk to Sergey, for instance, he says the thing that's the scariest for him, is not that Putin himself is kind of a madman, but that he gets so many people to agree with him.
Mm.
And he gave the example of like his, I don't know, cousin-in-law or something like that, that's married, or like, yeah, was like married to a Ukrainian person, and yet still was like buying the Putin line
Yeah.
on stuff. So I think that there's a general brainwashing that's happening that has to do with our distance from love, from community, from like real culture. And it's as much present, I think, in the U.S. as in Russia, unfortunately.
Oh, certainly. And I could, go deep into that because I have a degree in criminal justice, and I've studied a lot in intelligence work. And actually, I'm reading a book on, a few stories, the beginnings of the Cold War. So I understand where, how we got to this point. But I want to keep it to more cultural based conversations, and curious, of course. I mean, I'm curious if you talk to anybody over there or just close by in Europe, that have they reacted through music and arts and culture, and if so, how? And have you seen an effect of art, the power of art at hand? Because this is certainly the point where art needs to step in and say we need to make a statement, and not just think about our own careers. This is where I think arts and music can transcend itself into where it was the last probably decade. It seems like everybody was just more commercialism and doing their own thing. Now I feel like this is a time where we have to bind together as humans and say no, no, no to war. This is not a, we're not going to accept war. So have you guys seen anything really in the last couple of weeks come out of it artistically, musically, expressionism? From anywhere, from your conversations to anywhere you're looking, I guess, would be a follow-up question.
Jeremy, I don't know if you have directly through Margot, our friend who's in.
I do have a Margot story, but do you want to go first?
No, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean Margot, who, I mean, maybe you could have her on one of the Uncontaminated. Is she was talking about a song that she wrote, some songs that she wrote and put together for sort of a musical theater piece that was based on the experience of coal miners in Ukraine. And some of her songs, like she was talking to some of her friends that were part of that the production, and that the songs became like just like the songs that they would sing to each other as they're like in, like, I don't know what to call them, like shelters, like hiding from bombs, or if they're on the front lines. And there was a song that she sang about fighting, and it was really, I think, more of a personal song, not necessarily related to like any grand political fight. And that song became popular among like her group of friends, and also became this kind of like informal anthem for them, even though she never recorded that song, and maybe she'll record it now. So I think that was for me like a really touching example of just like a fairly localized like sort of incorporation of art into like just keeping hope alive, humanity, like keeping connectedness.
Mm, mm. Gideon, anything? Or?
I mean, I've seen lots of artists sort of voicing their support and coming into the realm of anti-war politics in a new way. Um, but I think in terms of like um, actual artistic expression, I haven't seen seen so many examples of that. I think partly because a lot of people are so in shock still,
Yeah.
and um, trying to figure out how to coalesce our feelings into something that's meaningful.
Mm.
And but I think, yeah, there's been such an outpouring of support, and that's meaningful. But what else can we do, as we were saying? Like,
Yeah.
what are other things we can do? And
And I think it's interesting, and in some press release or something, I was reflecting on like an interview that I'd done with a friend of mine, that right after Orisis came out, the album that we're re-releasing, and when we were making it, 10 years ago, and that there was an element of it that was kind of like almost like longing for this post-apocalyptic place where,
Mm.
like, the the frenetic, this sort of frenetic self-destructive civilization has actually fallen apart, and we're in this kind of post-apocalyptic calm.
Mm.
um I don't know, maybe I don't know if Gideon exactly shares that in that way, but
yeah,
there,
there's a lot to that.
there's more to unpack there, but that was kind of, in a way, this a little bit of like fantasy. And and now I think like we're living this more of apocalyptic reality. I think also, maybe being 10 years older, like, I definitely I don't know, I definitely have a different feeling about that. But I like listening back to ourselves from 10 plus years ago, and it actually kind of holds true, like this
Mm.
longing. It's really like a longing for, and not just the longing for, but actually kind of like through singing and through writing and through performing, it's like the creation of the space in which you can inhabit this, like, this more peaceful, this more healed, um this more integral, like, self and community, and
We may have just lost him
Yeah.
for a
It was,
moment. He was on a roll.
yeah, I know. It was Jeremy is going good, man. Now you see like a little ghost image right now, frozen.
Yeah.
uh, oh, that's the Zoom anomaly these days, right? You're like,
Yes.
you can pretend not, you just freeze up just to get out of a call, right?
This is
Excuse
fitting.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess to build off that, we can dive into like the One Beat project. Though you say you kind of jumped in. Oh, now he disappeared. But I guess I was going to build off that with the talk. Just if you guys could talk about the One Beat project as well. I'm fascinated with how you guys started the project, and how, or why too, I guess.
Mm. Yeah. So it began through the three co-founders, who are Jeremy and Chris Marinetti and Elena Park. They all met. Well, Jeremy and Elena met in college, um, at Northwestern, and then they all attended Bang on a Can's Summer Institute.
Mm.
Um, and Bang on a Can is just a kind of a seminal new music organization that's been around for quite a long time, and they wanted to do work that was sort of a continuation of some of their socially engaged artistic practices that they were excited about, with engaging young people in music making workshops. And this it started originally with Chris doing um, going to a school in the Bronx that didn't have a music program,
Mm.
and he started just doing music production with them and bringing in friends, other musician friends, like, oh, you want a trumpet? Here's a trumpet player. Here's a violinist. Here's a bass player. Um, and they would make these amazing tracks, and a lot of like beat making and hip hop production, and even music videos that they did with these kids. And that expanded into more projects like that around the city, and eventually doing projects in Rikers Island and a few of the juvenile detention centers around the city.
We're
Um,
getting Jeremy back. Sorry.
oh, Jeremy's coming back. Good, good. There
Yeah.
it is. This is good timing. He can take over the story from here. So, um, Jeremy, I was just telling the story of how One Beat started, and we were just talking about the the work in the Bronx and Rikers Island and various juvenile detention centers in the city, and I think you should take it over from there of like how you went from that into One Beat.
Can you guys still hear me okay? Okay, yeah, I had to change to my phone. I'm in this funny building right now where we run off a generator. So if anyone runs like a power tool or something, it cuts the internet.
Oh yeah.
Um, anyway, yeah, so that was a long time ago. So the other co-founder, one of the other co-founders of One Beat, Chris and I were doing a lot of work with high schools, in juvenile detention centers. We did one project with youth on Rikers Island, um, and started doing a bunch of other international projects, like kind of site specific, creative collaborations, and then we got this State Department grant,
Sure.
2011. Well, we saw the RFP and we applied and ended up getting it, and that ended up changing in some way all of our lives quite a lot, because that allowed us to run these music residency programs for the last 10, 11 years and meet an incredible amount of musicians, including the Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Russians that we've met. Yeah, I could go more into depth in that story, but that's the
Oh, sorry, I'm getting tripped up over a bit of glitchiness. But yeah, and are you guys still actively involved with the project, or have you kind of
Yeah,
handed over uh, the operations to somebody else and kind of focus on other or your
we're
musical
both
stuff too?
still engaged and less engaged than we used to be
Mm,
at the same time. So, but there's more that's being like during the pandemic, we weren't able to do these residencies in person anymore.
mm,
Um, and so we've had a few rounds of online residencies, which were both frustrating and also beautiful in
yeah,
terms of what they created. Um, and this spring, we're doing our first in-person in April residency again, which we're really excited about
yeah.
after this hiatus. And um, One Beat also just did a project in Algeria for a few weeks
Mm.
that just ended, and Jeremy also did an in-person project in Lebanon in Beirut, and which was interrupted by COVID a few times, but it did actually happen. Um, so yeah, we're still very involved.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't get to it at the beginning because obviously current affairs took over. But what drew you guys to music in the first place? Like, what was the connection? What really drove you to this path, to this present state, I guess, and why continue to create music and as an expression of yourselves?
Small question.
that's yeah. It's like explain your life.
1 minute.
I think
Yeah.
that the what drew us to music in the first place. For me, I don't know. I think it was like listening to Charles Mingus or something, and like
Mm,
the Dmitri Shostakovich. There was this record store, and like the like all the pop music was on the first floor, and then like the jazz and the classical was in the basement, and like other weird stuff. and there was this older guy that this was in Madison, Wisconsin, at the Exclusive Company, and there's this older guy that like was down there, and he was kind of like the keeper of the dungeon, you know, and he'd be like, and I'd go in there and I'd say, I play French horn. I want some French horn music, and he'd be like, you need to listen to Benjamin Britten's, Serenade.
Hmm.
And so I went there and I got it and I CD and I took it home and I listened to it. And I was like, "Poof." I think that was it. It was thanks to that guy and the public library.
Nice. Yeah.
I know Jeremy's only telling you a little smidgen of his story, because music runs deep in our family. But
Hmm.
for me, I started singing very, very young. As sort of, there's stories in the family that I was singing before I really had a lot of words. And my dad was a singer, and he also was an amateur musician, and I grew up being around music at the Bread and Puppet Theater in Vermont, which is a radical puppet theater company that has had sort of a deep connection to traditional music for most of its existence, as well as to classical music. The director, Peter Schumann, is really into Bach, and that's made its way in. But then I was really lucky to have a piano teacher. I studied classical piano as a kid, and she was a nun from Quebec, and was the sweetest woman and consummate musician.
Hmm.
And I also was exposed to my parents' beautiful record collection from the 60s and 70s, which I would come. They sort of stopped. They checked out of society in the 70s, and I would just come home from school and play piano and listen to records. And especially as I became a teenager, that
Hmm.
became a pretty regular ritual. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, Jeremy and I moved to New York City when we were in our early 20s, and we started just being really deeply involved in the music world here. Um, and that took us through various stages of, for me, going through traditional music and singing in lots of choirs and singing um, music from, say, Republic of Georgia, but also music from the Renaissance. And then I became involved with Meredith Monk, who I met actually because of Jeremy, who was a bookkeeper for her foundation and recommended me to go to an audition, and that changed my life. And I now sing with her a fair amount with a new project that she's doing, which cycles back into my interest now, which is much more in the realm of spirit with
Hmm.
sound, and she's deeply in that world, um, and the healing nature of music, and the way that you can access parts of yourself that are otherwise inaccessible,
Hmm.
maybe except save music and and meditation. I feel like those are the ways that you can access these parts of yourself. Um, this is a roundabout answer.
Yeah. Well, I feel like through my observations, conversations, and just going out myself, I find music more so than anything else will just bind just a group of people together. It doesn't matter what language or culture you're from. If you're into the beats, you're into the rhythm, you'll just collect, you'll surround. Say if a street musician's just playing some bongos and he's really, yeah, for a lack of better example, but you know, you'll bind people together. You know, buskers. You know, people just form around the musicians, and I think that's like an archaic kind of tribalism, you know, going back to the early days of modern man, I guess, right? It's just that early form of communication, that tribalism. And I don't know. Yeah, I find it, I'm just so fascinated with why, you know, what music and certain tones and certain, uh, notes will tap into that subconscious and really heal the soul. at the beta and the data levels of the mind. It's like it's fascinating. But I guess to kind of talk about your work now, we could go all philosophical and wax poetics on the larger scale, but which I love to do. But I also would love to talk about your new album, Supermoon, and I'm kind of curious. I guess first, how do you guys link up with Brassland and Alec? And second, like if like Jeremy, you said you listened to your was it your first album, Osiris, like 10 years ago? And kind of curious how you guys evolved from the first album to now and this new album of Supermoon.
So it's Orisis. It's like
Oh,
Osiris.
sorry, yeah.
You have to flip
Mild dyslexia. Sorry about that.
No, it's like it's a creation of
It's our dyslexia,
it's our
actually.
dyslexia. So that's a good question. When we were working on Orisis, or we wouldn't have even known what we were going to call it. We were living up in Hudson, New York. We were both pretty broke. We had both just left New York, I think, after having been there for around 4 or 5 years. And it was really a kind of a beautiful moment to be in Hudson, New York, before kind of the hordes descended upon that little town. And we had a really nice like community of friends there, cheesemakers that would like give us, they're like, this like wheel of cheese like wasn't quite perfect. Like, would you like this huge wheel of cheese? And it was just like, there's a lot of like dinners, like making each other food and just kind of like it was a night. We had a nice like kind of feeling of camaraderie and community. We had a friend who actually lives near me now in New Orleans, Rob, who like had a music store, Musica, and we like recorded half of the record in his basement in like the freezing cold, but it was like the best sound isolated space we could find. I remember one track we recorded in our apartment, and Gideon just like draped a blanket over himself and held up the blanket while he sang the part, so as to not get the sound of the room. It was definitely like a hippie rigged album, made on like an M box and Ableton, and it was, but in a way, it's still perhaps my favorite of the three. Maybe it's just because like our first child or whatever, but because it was just so earnest, and we really like we really spent a lot of time on it. And it felt like, particularly in that moment, like it felt like when we would play shows in Hudson, like our friends would show up. It had that effect of like kind of creating almost like an energy field that existed in the town and existed in our group of friends, and they'd play the record all the time on the community radio. It's like, and then we were just like in the fabric of the town. This is getting a little off your question, but like we were working with this youth group, and then the youth group had their own radio show, which was great. And then they recorded we kind of produced the theme song for the radio station, which they played like 20 times a day, no, 200 times a day for like 10 years. Anyway, so that was really like, we were part of the fabric of something cool. It's definitely a little bit more of like a rock and roll, sort of more psychedelic rock album, a little more country in there, and old, old timey, or like and shape note stuff, mixed with some beats. And then I feel like if you fast forward to Supermoon, like it was recorded when we're living in different places. I think it took on a much more ethereal thing. It's a much more professionally produced and recorded record. And is, I think, just it's a different era almost between 2011 and like 2021. Do you agree with the stuff I'm saying, Gideon? I don't know. Just
yeah. No, when we were talking sort of about this maybe fantasy of a post-apocalyptic calm of the early 2010s that we were channeling into our music. I think the last album is definitely much more a reflection of the dark sort of Trump era and the desire to try a, try to find a way to speak to our higher selves that doesn't get bound by this dark time that we were living through then. And it feels in a way like almost more mature and aspirational, um, for something better, but also uh, like looking at the darkness a little bit more.
Mm.
And um, and in a way, I feel like the music that we're sorry, there's a helicopter. Um, the music that we're writing new music now, and that feels maybe even more so like that. Like it's becoming, um, yeah. It's less in fantasy and more in the realities that we're living in,
Mm.
but while still like trying to transcend them.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean the next record is gonna be the best record. And I mean we did a month long. Felt like a month. It was a week long retreat on the Jersey Shore, which is a place I'd never thought I would end up. But we were there in January, and it wasn't like the TV show at all. It was completely, not that I've seen it, but I can imagine. But it was completely empty.
Mm.
It was like the Truman Show, but all the actors left. You know, um, the beach was beautiful. It was cold but really clear. It was like there was a full moon one night, and we had a bunch of supplies to aid in the psychonautic journeying, and we just like I don't know. I think we like connected to something that is in a way like this kind of purification of the concept that we had started with, which is like, you know, started off with a kind of like, you know, like let's write some songs and like you know, write some poetry and put it to music, and this becomes like let's go on a journey like to our to like the essence of ourselves and the essence of our musicality. And like, so I think I don't know, I'm getting kind of out there, but it's like I think that's what we want to be able to bring audiences on.
Mm. Yeah. Well, have them transcend this day and age as well with the music, which it's actually kind of did to me when I was listening to a few tracks of Supermoon. Is like I kind of already kind of left this plane of existence a bit and brought me to a nice place, which is good, which we all need to be in right now.
I'm glad it did that for you.
Yeah. Oh, do you have a? Oh, do you have a? So Supermoon's out now. That's correct, right? Or
Yeah.
okay, Supermoon's out now. Do you have a date for the new album, or are you just in process now?
We don't have a date, but we're hoping to record this summer.
Okay, cool,
Yeah,
cool.
and so it's very much a work in progress right now. Yeah, I'm gonna get a little quieter.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, well, I didn't want to keep you guys too much longer, but kind of curious, how do you link up with just Brassland, I guess, and Alec, and with that label, I guess.
So I used to sit next to Alec when I was, so I still do work for Bang in a Can. I worked for Bang in a Can starting as I was the bookkeeper for them when I first got to New York in 2006, and did that job for, I don't know, 5 years or something like that. And as my role there, I sat next to him in the office, and I don't think we ever worked together, but we just like, you know, would talk and like trade music and whatnot. And yeah, I think I sort of randomly many years later we'd see each other from now and again. And at some point I said, "Hey, we got this record do you want to check it out? And he kind of said, probably not, man. This is very Alec. He's like, definitely, like, this is a hard business. Like, we're not accepting any new artists. And then I was actually very moved because Alex is kind of I don't know, he's not on the surface a very touchy-feely kind of guy, but underneath, who knows? He did listen to the record and he was like, I was very moved by this. I want more people to hear it. So yeah, we've been grateful for that. He's been helping crack the whip and kind of move things forward, and yeah, I mean, I'm excited. Like, I've spent the last 10 years working on this cultural exchange program, which has been amazing and life-changing for me, and I think for a lot of other people. But I am passing the torch, and going to be working on that less. So it's a really interesting time I think for all of us in the band, but certainly for me to like open up into this creative space again, and just kind of like, I almost feel like I went into a cave for 10 years and I'm coming back out, and then I'm like, whoa, the world has changed and I've changed. But it's exciting, to be with all these humans on the journey.
Yeah. Gideon, anything to add to that? Or?
Well, I think this is something that keeps coming up for me is how, like, people ask when you talk about being a musician, they're like, oh, what are you working on, or like, what's the sound that you are, which is always an impossible question for me. But I've been thinking a lot about how all the projects that I'm working on feel in the same, like, in a sense, they're like the same piece of art. And that feels really, really good, that everything feels so integrated. Like, there's all the artists that I'm working with, Briars and outside of that, have such deep, even if their methodologies are really different, we're all like really engaged with trying to figure out how to tell stories, but also how to tap into something that's beyond ourselves. And I feel really grateful that in some ways, through the work that Jeremy and I have done, we've been able to meet a lot of older artists, mentors, that have been doing this work for 50 years. And like Pauline Oliveros, who we met before she died, and Meredith, who's been a huge inspiration for me, and also a lot of other artists that are a little younger but still active. Liz Lerman, who's a choreographer but also philosopher, and has been a huge guide for us. And so, like, there's our musical world that we sort of came up in around the indie scene when we first were starting playing in Brooklyn. But then what's fed us so much recently has been the last 10 years of working with these amazing international musicians, but also having these master artists that have helped us develop that work and have taught us so much that I feel like is now really making its way into our process and our music. And it's fed by this content. Like, I was watching your interview with Laraji, and I was thinking about all the people that he references, and how, in artistic practice and cultural practices, we are conduits of all that came before us. And I'm feeling so much a part of that swirl these days. I'm very grateful that we are on that boat,
Yeah.
And so curious to see how it's going to keep feeding into our artistic practice.
Now, I guess one last question. Anywhere we could catch you live, or do you guys do live or just recorded stuff? Or
we haven't done live in a little while, partly because of the pandemic, of course, but we are planning to.
Nice.
Yeah.
And just for people to kind of, where can they find your stuff online and stuff?
It's all over the interwebs. You can find it on Spotify and
Yeah.
Bandcamp.
The
You,
usual.
the
The
usual,
usual.
yeah.
Yeah. I just always like to ask. Yeah, some people have maybe just like some other kind of links too. So I don't. Just for curious people or discoverers of new sound and who can't use Google, I guess, if they just like, oh, Briars of North America.
I
Um,
mean, most of your listeners probably know this, but Bandcamp is the best.
yeah.
Like to support the band, like buy the record on Bandcamp and listen to it there or listen to it anywhere. But that is, everybody knows this, but Spotify pays like 0.003 cents a play. So that's nice. And we are like re-releasing our first two albums.
Cool.
I think we are re-releasing Orisis on these Equinox. So within the next few days. So that's exciting. And then I think we'll re-release Veins and Arteries, which was our sophomore record, shortly after. And we have some cool videos actually, like that I feel like I love if more people watch. I personally like kind of love making them and working on them. A 3-song thing, which was our like quote unquote live set. Which I was in Mexico City, Gideon was in Vermont, Greg was in New York somewhere, and we recorded separately, and it was very much not live, but it was kind of like simulated live, and I find those to be really sweet.
Yeah, those are great.
So we'll send links.
Our effort to try to do what people were doing during the height of the pandemic, and
Well, one last thing. Any advice for young aspiring musicians these days? I always like to ask this too for experienced craftsmen like yourselves.
I always say to just keep making.
Yeah.
Keep making and keep collaborating with other artists, because that's the way you learn. And not just other musicians, but I think especially for musicians, it's really helpful to collaborate with non-musicians, either musically or collaborating across mediums. There's so much to learn that way, and the more you collaborate, the more you learn. The more you learn whether or not that's something you really want to do, and if it is, if you keep creating, you'll find your way. As challenging as it might be, it's always fruitful.
I think my pro tip would be, that's a reference to our other band member Greg Chezik, who also is known as Pro Tips on the internet. My pro tip would be, like, and this is something I work on every day, so I think it's a good piece of advice, is just like follow the inkling. Like, we all have like really kind of quiet suggestions that are popping up in our minds of things to say, of musical ideas, but like it's only sort of in a quiet space that we can even hear that sound amidst the tumult, amidst the other like angry thoughts, or like, you should play C major. Follow the inkling, and it'll just like get louder and weirder and be your own voice. For a while I worked with the famous Mr. Jeff Mangum, and like the thing about that guy is like he just followed his inklings, and he follows nothing else pretty much. And that's why his stuff was just like, so like, whoa, where did that come from? It's just like, no, it's like purely channeled from only a place that he could access. And we all have that place that we can only access, but I think we're like, no, but I should like have the cheese pizza. I don't know.
Yeah. Cool. And I would love to talk to anybody. Thank you once again for taking your time for having this discussion and joining me. And I would love to have any artisans or particularly in Europe, or who are maybe fleeing the crisis, to come on and talk openly, if in a safe manner if they can, as well, because I really feel like it's critical to have open open forum discussions in a free nation. So I would love to get anybody else on who can who would love to discuss current affairs in their perspective as well.
Yeah, we can put you in touch with a few people.
Cool.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank
Well,
you so much for having us on.
of course, and
Thank
be
you, Russ.
well, and be sane. And I'll definitely dive deeper into your catalog of music, because I do need to transcend this world, at least spiritually, just like most of us do, as I've said before. But it was a pleasure
Well, just
meeting.
listen 1 hour a day and you'll transcend. You won't have any
Yeah, I
other.
start floating up. I'm like, whoa! I hit enlightenment, and all in a week. Yeah.
Guaranteed or your money back. Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's good marketing. But anyways, I'll let you guys go. Enjoy your afternoons. And New Orleans, what, an hour behind, I guess. So enjoy New Orleans, by the way. A lovely town.